used to live in an old apartment building on the edge of town. The kind of place people only stayed in because the rent was cheap. The hallways always smelled damp. The lights flickered constantly. And the elevator never worked properly. Most people avoided using it at night. But I worked late shifts. And after getting home exhausted every night around 2 a.m., I didn't care enough to take the stairs. At first, nothing unusual ever happened. The elevator was just old. Sometimes it shook while moving. Sometimes the lights would dim for a few seconds before coming back on. But after a while, I started noticing something strange. Every few nights, the elevator would stop on a floor that didn't exist. Floor 7. The weird thing was, the building only had 6 residential floors. There was no 7th floor, at least officially. The first time it happened, I thought maybe the display was broken. The elevator stopped suddenly. The light above the buttons flickered, and the number 7 appeared. The doors slowly opened, but there was nothing there. Just darkness, no hallway, no lights, nothing. It looked like the elevator doors opened into an empty black void. I immediately pressed the close door button. Nothing happened. Then after a few seconds, the doors shut on their own and the elevator continued moving like nothing happened. I laughed it off afterward. I even joked about it to one of my neighbors. But the expression on his face changed instantly. He asked me what floor I saw. When I said 7, he went quiet. Then he told me something I still think about to this day. He said years ago, before I moved in, a woman disappeared in the building. According to rumors, she was last seen entering the elevator around 3 in the morning. The security cameras showed her stepping inside, but never coming back out. No one ever figured out where she went. After hearing that story, I stopped using the elevator for almost 2 weeks. But one rainy night after a long shift, I was too tired to climb 6 flights of stairs. So I got into the elevator again. Everything seemed normal at first. Floor 1, floor 2, floor 3. Then suddenly, the lights went out completely. For about 3 seconds, I stood there in total darkness. Then the emergency light came on, dim red, and that's when I noticed something horrifying. I wasn't alone anymore. There was someone standing in the corner of the elevator. A woman, tall, thin, pale. Her head tilted slightly downward so I couldn't see her face. I froze. I didn't hear the elevator doors open. I didn't hear anyone walk in. She was just suddenly there. The elevator stopped again. Floor 7. The doors slowly opened. This time I could see something. A hallway, long, dark, endless. And at the very end of it, someone was standing there watching us. The woman inside the elevator slowly lifted her head toward me, and in a weak whisper she said, "Don't let it see you." Then every light inside the elevator exploded at once. I heard a loud metallic screech. The elevator dropped suddenly for half a second before stopping hard. When the normal lights came back on, the woman was gone. The doors were closed, and the display showed floor 6. I ran out of the elevator the second the doors opened. The next morning, I went downstairs and asked the building manager about floor 7. He stared at me for a long time without saying anything. Then he quietly said, "There used to be a 7th floor." I asked him what happened to it, and all he said was, "They sealed it after the disappearances." Back when I was in college, I lived in a small dorm building near campus. It was old, poorly maintained, and unbelievably quiet at night. My room was at the very end of the hallway. During the day, the place felt normal enough. But after 2 a.m., the entire building felt different. Sometimes I would hear footsteps slowly moving through the hallway. Whenever I opened my door to check, there was never anyone there. At the time, I ignored it. I told myself it was just the building settling or people upstairs moving around. But one night, something happened that I still can't explain. It was around 3 in the morning when my phone suddenly rang. The room was completely dark except for the light from my phone screen. Unknown number. I stared at it for a few seconds before answering. At first, there was no voice. Just breathing. Slow, heavy breathing. I said, "Hello?" A few seconds of silence passed. Then a low, distorted voice quietly said, "Look at your window." The second I heard that, my stomach dropped. I slowly turned my head toward the window beside my bed. At first, I couldn't see anything except darkness. But after a few seconds, I noticed someone standing outside, a tall figure, completely still, not moving, not speaking, just standing there watching me. I immediately pulled the curtain shut and ended the call, but less than 2 seconds later, my phone rang again. Same unknown number. My hands were shaking as I answered. This time the voice sounded calmer. It said, "I'm not outside. I'm below you." Every hair on my body stood up. Because my room was on the second floor, I slowly got out of bed and started walking toward my door. Then suddenly, knock. A soft knock came from the other side. I froze. A few seconds later, knock, knock, slow. Almost like someone dragging their fingers across the wood. I stood in front of the door without moving. Then the voice whispered from the hallway, "Open the door." I couldn't respond. I could barely breathe. Then my phone started ringing again. The sound nearly made me drop it. I answered immediately. And this time the voice softly said, "I'm already inside." At that exact moment, the hallway lights outside suddenly shut off. The small strip of light under my door disappeared. Now the entire room was pitch black. Then came another knock. Much louder this time. Bang! 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 It sounded like someone was trying to break the door down. I grabbed the metal lamp beside my bed, even though my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Then suddenly, everything stopped. No knocking, no breathing, nothing, complete silence. I waited nearly a full minute before slowly walking toward the door again. The hallway lights had turned back on. I looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. The hallway was empty, but then I noticed something horrifying. Right in front of my door were wet footprints, as if someone had been standing there soaking wet. I didn't open the door for the rest of the night. The next morning, I checked my phone's call history. There was no unknown number. No missed calls, nothing. I tried convincing myself it was all some kind of nightmare. But the wet footprints outside my room were still there. And the worst part? Later that day, I found out I had been completely alone in the dorm that night. Everyone else had gone home for the weekend. About 2 years ago, I became obsessed with exploring abandoned places. I wasn't one of those people looking for ghosts or trying to become famous online. I just liked the feeling of being somewhere forgotten. Empty buildings fascinated me. Old hospitals, abandoned schools, broken houses in the middle of nowhere. There was something about the silence inside those places that felt wrong, like the building itself was watching you. One weekend, a friend told me about an abandoned house, hidden deep in the woods about an hour outside my town. According to him, nobody had lived there for years. People avoided it because of rumors. He told me strange lights were sometimes seen through the windows at night. I didn't believe any of that. Honestly, it just sounded like the perfect place to explore. So one Saturday evening, I drove out there alone. The deeper I went into the woods, the worse the road became. Eventually, the pavement disappeared completely. It turned into dirt and mud surrounded by massive trees on both sides. By the time I finally saw the house, the sun was already setting. The place looked ancient, 2 stories tall. Rotting wood, broken windows, a porch that looked like it could collapse at any moment. But the strangest thing was, the front door was slightly open. I remember standing there thinking how weird that was. If nobody had been there in years, why wasn't the door fully shut? I pulled out my flashlight and stepped inside. The smell hit me instantly. Mold, wet wood, and something else underneath it, something rotten. The floor creaked loudly under every step. Most of the furniture was still there, covered in thick dust. Old family photos hung crooked on the walls. Some of them were so faded you could barely make out the faces. I slowly walked through the living room into the kitchen. And that's when I noticed the first thing that made me uncomfortable. The kitchen table looked clean. Not perfectly clean, but cleaner than everything else in the house. There was less dust there, like someone had recently touched it. I remember laughing nervously to myself and saying, "Okay, that's weird." Then I heard it. A laugh. A child laughing somewhere upstairs. I froze instantly. At first I thought maybe another explorer had come here before me. But the laugh didn't sound normal. It sounded distant, echoing, almost like it came from inside the walls. I shouted, Hello? No response. Just silence again. I should have left right there. But instead, I slowly started walking upstairs. Each step creaked so loudly it felt like the entire house could hear me moving. At the top of the stairs was a long, dark hallway. 3 doors. The first room was empty. The second room looked like an old bedroom. But the third door at the end of the hallway was slightly open, and there was light coming from inside. A faint flickering light. My heart started pounding. There shouldn't have been electricity in that house. I slowly pushed the door open. Inside the room was an old television sitting on the floor. And somehow, it was on. Static filled the screen. I just stood there staring at it, trying to understand how it was even possible. Then suddenly, the static disappeared, and I saw myself, Leave, standing in the doorway. The TV was showing me in real time. I took a step backward. The version of me on the screen didn't move. It stayed standing there, smiling. I felt my stomach twist, because I wasn't smiling. Then the figure on the screen slowly raised one hand and pointed behind me. I spun around instantly. Nobody there. The hallway behind me was empty, but when I looked back at the TV, the figure was now much closer to the screen. Its face looked wrong, too pale, eyes completely black, and the smile way too wide. Then the child's laughter came again, this time directly behind me. I ran. I didn't even look back. I sprinted down the stairs so fast I nearly fell. As I reached the front door, I heard footsteps upstairs. Multiple footsteps. Running. Like several people were chasing me through the hallway above. I threw the front door open and ran outside toward my car. But before getting in, I looked back at the house one last time. And I wish I hadn't, because every single upstairs window had someone standing behind it. Tall figures, perfectly still, watching me, smiling. I got in my car and sped out of there without stopping once. The weirdest part happened later that night. When I got home, I checked the photos and videos on my camera. Every file from inside the house was corrupted, except for one photo. The final photo. It was a picture of the upstairs hallway. And standing at the very end of it was me, facing the camera, smiling.